Deep beneath the modern streets of Kobe, Japan, where 3 million people live their daily lives, something ancient stirs in the darkness. This is a city where the past refuses to die, where the spirits of the dead walk among the living. Tonight we explore 4 locations where ordinary residents of Kobe have documented encounters with forces beyond understanding. The Nunobiki Tunnel, where construction workers who died over a century ago still cry out from beyond the grave. The Akashi Kaikyō Bridge, where hundreds of souls lost to tragedy refuse to cross over. Mount Rokko, where mysterious lights dance with purpose through the forest. And the Maya Hotel, an abandoned palace where guests checked in decades ago, but never checked out. These are not legends passed down through generations. These are recent encounters, documented by credible witnesses who never expected to become believers. The question is not whether these places are haunted. The question is why the spirits of Kobe refuse to rest. The Nunobiki Tunnel cuts through the heart of Mount Rokko, connecting central Kobe to the residential districts beyond. Built during Japan's rapid modernization in 1887, this engineering marvel required the dangerous labor of hundreds of workers who carved through solid rock using primitive explosives and hand tools. Construction records from the Kobe Municipal Archives reveal a grim truth. 17 men died during the tunnel's creation. Cave-ins, explosions, bodies crushed by falling stone. Most were poor farmers from rural villages, desperate for work to feed their families. When they died, their bodies were buried in unmarked graves near the tunnel entrance. No compensation was paid, no memorial was erected. They became the forgotten dead of progress. Local historian Professor Kenji Nakamura spent decades researching the tunnel's dark past. These workers came from all over Japan, seeking opportunity in the growing city of Kobe. But the construction was incredibly dangerous. Meiji-era safety standards were virtually non-existent. When men died, they were simply replaced by others desperate for work. Their names were recorded only in death certificates that were filed away and forgotten. The tunnel opened to great fanfare in 1888, praised as a symbol of Japan's modernization. But the celebration came at a cost measured in human lives. The 17 dead workers were never honored, never remembered. Their sacrifice was buried as deep as their bodies. Takeshi Yamamoto has driven taxis through Kobe for 32 years. He never believed in ghosts until the night of March 15, 2019. He was driving a passenger through the Nunobiki Tunnel at 2:17 a.m. when they both heard them. Voices calling out in old Japanese dialect. They seemed to come from the tunnel walls themselves. His passenger, an elderly woman, started crying. She said they sounded like they were in terrible pain, begging for help. The voices weren't random sounds. They were specific pleas in archaic Japanese, using terms and pronunciations that haven't been heard in over a century. They kept saying "Tasakeri Kuri," help us, and "Ai ne karatai," we want to go home. But the way they pronounced the words, it was like listening to ghosts from the Meiji period. Yamamoto pulled over inside the tunnel, his hands shaking. The voices continued for nearly 10 minutes. They spoke of cave-ins, of being trapped, of wanting to see their families one more time. His passenger begged him to drive faster, but Yamamoto found himself frozen, listening to the desperate pleas of men who had been dead for over a century. Construction supervisor Hiroshi Tanaka encountered the supernatural while performing routine maintenance inside the tunnel in September 2020. His crew was working on electrical repairs when they heard hammering sounds echoing through the tunnel. But they were the only ones working that night. The hammering had a rhythm to it, like men breaking rock with hand tools. Then they heard voices arguing about dangerous conditions, warning each other about unstable sections. The temperature inside the tunnel suddenly plummeted 20 degrees in a matter of seconds. Tanaka could see his breath in the air, which should have been impossible in September. That's when he saw him. The shadow of a man in traditional Meiji-era work clothes, standing about 50 meters away. When Tanaka called out to him, the figure vanished, but the cold remained for another hour. His workers refused to continue that night. 2 of them quit the next day, claiming they would never work in the tunnel again. Tanaka filed an official report about the incident, but it was dismissed as stress and imagination. Local paranormal researcher Dr. Michiko Sato has documented over 60 encounters in the Nunobiki Tunnel since 2018. The phenomena follows consistent patterns. Witnesses always report voices speaking in 1880s regional dialect, discussing work conditions, cave-ins, and wanting to return to their families. These are not random hauntings. These are specific memories of trauma, replaying endlessly. Temperature drops of 15 to 20 degrees are commonly reported, even during summer months. Electronic devices malfunction without explanation. Car engines stall. Radio static increases dramatically. But most disturbing are the voices. Always male, always speaking in archaic Japanese, always expressing the same desperate desire to go home. Dr. Sato believes the spirits are trapped by unfinished business. They died far from home, with no proper burial, no recognition of their sacrifice. They remain in the tunnel because it was the last place they were alive, still trying to complete the work that killed them. Night security guard Kenji Watanabe patrols the tunnel entrance area 3 times per week. Over the past 5 years, he has encountered the unexplained more times than he cares to count. The voices usually begin around 2 a.m., always from inside the tunnel, always speaking the same archaic Japanese. Watanabe has tried recording the voices on his phone, but the audio always comes out as static. He has called police several times, thinking someone might be trapped inside, but searches never find anyone. The voices seem to emanate from the tunnel walls themselves. On October 13, 2024, local paranormal investigation group Kansai Ghost Hunters spent the night inside the tunnel with digital recording equipment. At 12:43 May, their sensitive microphones recorded what sounded like distant hammering, rhythmic strikes against stone that seemed to come from within the tunnel walls. The sounds lasted 7 minutes before stopping abruptly. 15 minutes later, they captured what can only be described as voices. The digital recording reveals at least 3 distinct male voices speaking in confirmed Meiji-era Japanese dialect. The words are clear. Abunai, dangerous. Kabe ga kuzureru, the wall is collapsing. Tasukeri, help. Most chilling of all. Mada koko nai aru, we are still here. Teen leader Yuki Matsumoto has investigated dozens of allegedly haunted locations across Japan. The Nunobiki Tunnel was different. The voices were too clear, too specific, too historically accurate to be dismissed as imagination or audio pareidolia. These were the final words of men who died building this tunnel, somehow preserved in the stone and steel around them. Acoustic engineers from Kobe University studied the tunnel as sound properties in 2023. The curved walls in specific dimensions should not produce the echoing effects witnesses describe. The voices seem to originate from impossible locations, within solid rock, from empty air, from all directions simultaneously. More disturbing is the temporal consistency. The voices always use vocabulary and pronunciation specific to the 1880s construction period. They reference work conditions, tools, and safety concerns that match historical records exactly. How can this be explained by natural phenomena? Linguistic professor Dr. Hiroshi Yamada analyzed recordings from multiple witnesses. The dialect patterns are consistent with rural Japanese speech from the 1880s, specifically from regions where historical records show the tunnel workers originated. The pronunciation includes archaic verb forms and regional accents that have not been used in over a century. The Nunobiki Tunnel remains one of Kobe's most vital transportation links, used by thousands of commuters daily. But after dark, it becomes something else entirely. A prison for the souls of 17 forgotten workers, still calling out for recognition, still begging to go home to families long dead. The voices continue. The temperature drops persist. And every night, someone driving through the tunnel hears the desperate pleas of the dead, begging for help that will never come. The question remains, are these the echoes of a tragedy from 1887, or are 17 souls still trapped in the darkness, waiting for someone to remember their sacrifice? The Akashi Kaikyō Bridge stretches nearly 4 kilometers across the turbulent waters of the Akashi Strait, connecting the mainland city of Kobe with Awaji Island. When it opened in 1998, it became the longest suspension bridge in the world, a triumph of human engineering that took over a decade to complete. But this monument to progress was built on a foundation of tragedy that locals believe has never been forgotten by the dead. The bridge exists because of disaster, born from the deaths of hundreds of innocent people who simply wanted to cross the water safely. The families of the lost demanded that regular ferry service be replaced by a permanent bridge, a way to ensure such a tragedy could never happen again. Their petition became the driving force behind the Akashi Kaikyō Bridge project. In a very real sense, the bridge exists because of the dead, built as a memorial to their sacrifice, and a promise that no one would die crossing these waters again. Fishing boat captain Masanori Harada has worked the waters around the bridge for over 20 years. His encounters with the unexplained began shortly after the bridge opened. He was fishing about 500 meters from the bridge at dawn when he saw them, figures floating in the water. At first, he thought they were debris or maybe swimmers in trouble. But as he got closer, he realized they weren't quite solid. Harada describes seeing translucent human forms drifting near the bridge's massive support pillars, always in groups, always moving against the current. They wear old-fashioned clothing from the 1950s. Sometimes he can see their faces clearly. Men, women, children. They look confused, like they're still waiting for the ferry to reach shore. Other fishermen have reported similar encounters. Nets become impossibly heavy when fishing near the bridge, as if weighed down by invisible cargo. Boat engines stall without mechanical cause. Compasses spin wildly. Radio communications fill with static that sounds eerily like voices crying for help in the distance. Retired ferry captain Ichiro Suzuki operated rescue boats during the 1955 disaster. Now 85 years old, he still dreams about the voices of the drowning. In recent years, he has returned to the waters beneath the bridge, drawn by something he cannot explain. On foggy nights, he sees them, the passengers from the lost ferries, still waiting for rescue boats that will never come. They appear exactly as they did in 1955, wearing the same clothes, carrying the same belongings, their faces showing the same terror from their final moments. They don't seem to realize they're dead. They wave at passing boats, calling out for help in voices that carry impossibly far across the water. Local medium Fumiko Watanabe has lived her entire life in the shadow of the Akashi Kaikyō Bridge. She claims the spirits of the ferry victims remain trapped beneath the bridge, confused and lost. They died so suddenly, so violently, that they don't understand they're dead. They're still waiting for rescue boats that will never come. The bridge above them, the very structure built to prevent another tragedy, has become their prison. Watanabe regularly receives visits from families whose ancestors died in the 1955 disaster. She helps them communicate with the trapped spirits, offering prayers and ceremonies to guide them toward peace. But many refuse to leave. They feel responsible for the deaths of others, believing they should have done more to save their fellow passengers. Marine construction worker Daisuke Nakamura worked on the bridge's foundation during its construction in the 1990s. The underwater work was dangerous, requiring deep-sea diving in the same waters where the ferries had sunk decades earlier. Strange things happened during the construction. Tools would vanish without explanation. Underwater cameras would malfunction in specific areas. Divers reported feeling hands grabbing at them in the darkness, though no one else was present. Most unsettling were the sounds captured by underwater microphones. The construction crew used audio equipment to communicate between surface and dive teams. But the recordings also captured other sounds. Voices speaking 1950s Japanese, the creaking of metal under stress, and what sounded like hundreds of people calling for help simultaneously. Nakamura remembers one incident clearly. He was working 80 meters below the surface when his diving lights suddenly illuminated dozens of human forms floating in the water around him. They were translucent, but clearly visible, dressed in 1950s clothing, their faces showing expressions of terror and confusion. When he tried to approach them, they scattered like schools of fish, disappearing into the darkness. Residents of nearby coastal areas report strange phenomena on foggy nights. Ghostly lights move beneath the bridge's span, sometimes appearing to form the outline of the lost ferries. Witnesses describe hearing phantom foghorns, the sound of engines struggling against heavy seas, and voices calling out in 1950s Japanese dialect. Coast Guard records show an unusual number of emergency calls from the bridge area, reports of people in the water that search teams can never locate. Sonar equipment occasionally detects large objects moving beneath the bridge in formation, following the exact route the ferries would have taken. But visual confirmation is impossible in the deep, dark water. Marine biologist Dr. Kenji Tanaka has studied the bridge area's ecosystem for over a decade. The waters beneath the bridge are known for unusual behavior among marine life. Fish avoid certain areas entirely, even during peak feeding seasons. Seabirds refuse to land on the bridge's towers. Even dolphins, common in the inland sea, give the bridge area a wide berth. Temperature readings in the water show inexplicable cold spots and move with apparent intelligence. These areas maintain temperatures 10 to 15 degrees below surrounding water, despite no geological or oceanographic explanation for such phenomena. The Akashi Kaikyō Bridge stands as one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements, a symbol of progress and safety that carries thousands of commuters daily. But in the dark waters beneath its span, something remains unfinished. The victims of the 1955 ferry disaster may have found their memorial in steel and concrete, but their spirits still search for a different kind of peace. The bridge was built to ensure no one would ever again die crossing these waters. But for 304 souls lost in 1955, the crossing never ended. They remain in the depths of the Akashi Strait, eternal passengers on a journey that can never reach its destination, waiting for a rescue that will never come. In Japanese folklore, Hitodama are mysterious orbs of blue-white light that appear at night, drifting through forests, mountains, and graveyards. Traditional belief holds that these lights are the souls of the recently deceased, wandering the earth before moving on to the afterlife. Mount Rokko, the towering peak that overlooks Kobe, has been a hotspot for Hitodama sightings for centuries. But in recent decades, the encounters have intensified, with witnesses reporting lights that display intelligence, purpose, and an unsettling ability to interact with the living. The mountain's spiritual significance predates modern Kobe by thousands of years. Ancient shrines dot its slopes, marking places where the boundary between the living and dead is believed to be thin. For generations, local families have reported seeing the lights of departed relatives on Mount Rokko, appearing one final time before passing into eternity. Hiking guide Toshihiko Saito has led thousands of tourists up Mount Rokko's trails over the past 15 years. His first encounter with the Hitodama lights occurred on a clear October night in 2018. He was leading a small group back down the mountain around 9 p.m. when they saw them. 3 bright blue orbs floating about 10 meters off the trail. They weren't random lights. They moved with purpose, following the hiking group for nearly a kilometer. The orbs maintained a consistent distance from Sato's group, pacing their movement exactly. When the hikers stopped, the lights stopped. When they resumed walking, the lights followed. One of his clients tried to photograph them, but they immediately dimmed and vanished the moment she raised her camera. 5 minutes later, they reappeared as if nothing had happened. Sato has encountered the lights dozens of times since. They seem most active on nights when the mountain is shrouded in mist, appearing singly or in groups of up to 7 orbs. The lights range in size from basketballs to beach balls, always maintaining the same ethereal blue-white glow. They never make sound, never emit heat, but somehow convey a sense of awareness and intelligence. Local resident Miyuki Tanaka has lived at the base of Mount Rokko her entire life. Her encounters with the lights began after her husband's death in 2020. The first time was 3 days after his funeral. She was sitting on her porch when she noticed a single blue light moving slowly down the mountain. It stopped directly across from her house and pulsed 3 times, exactly like her husband used to flash the porch light to let her know he was home safe from his evening walks. The light appeared at the same time every night for 2 weeks, always stopping at the same location, always pulsing 3 times. On the 14th night, it pulsed once, moved closer to her house, and then faded away. She never saw it again, but she knew it was him saying goodbye one last time. Tanaka's experience is not unique. Many residents report similar encounters after the death of loved ones. The lights seem drawn to places of emotional significance, appearing near homes where the deceased once lived, following familiar routes they walked in life, lingering at spots where important memories were made. Mountain climber Daisuke Honda documented multiple encounters with groups of Hitodama lights during a solo camping trip in August 2023. He was sleeping in his tent around 2 a.m. when the entire campsite was illuminated by blue light. He looked outside and counted at least 15 orbs floating in a perfect circle around his tent. They were about the size of basketballs, completely silent and bright enough to read by. The lights remained for over an hour, occasionally pulsing in unison as if communicating. Honda wasn't afraid. They felt curious, like they were observing him, trying to understand what he was doing there. When he finally fell back asleep, they were gone in the morning, but the grass where they had hovered was warm to the touch, even though the morning was cold. Honda returned to the same camping spot 3 more times, hoping to encounter the lights again. Each time they appeared, always in the same formation, always displaying the same curious behavior. He began bringing offerings of food and incense, following traditional practices for honoring the dead. The lights seemed to respond positively, staying longer and appearing brighter when offerings were present. Buddhist monk Reverend Kenji Watanabe, whose temple sits at the base of Mount Rokko, has counseled families experiencing Hitodama encounters for over 30 years. The lights are not something to fear. They represent souls who have unfinished business or strong attachments to places or people. Mount Rokko has always been a threshold between worlds. The spirits gather there because it's easier for them to manifest in such a spiritually charged location. Ancient Japanese beliefs about death and the afterlife provide context for the Mount Rokko phenomena. According to Shinto tradition, human souls undergo a complex journey after death. Some spirits become kami, protective deities watching over their descendants. Others become lost, wandering between worlds until they find peace. The mountain has also been a site of human tragedy throughout history. During World War II, air raid shelters carved into its slopes became tombs when bombing raids caused cave-ins. In the post-war period, economic desperation drove many to suicide on the mountain's cliffs. More recently, hiking accidents claim lives every year on its treacherous trails. Each tragedy leaves what Reverend Watanabe calls spiritual residue, emotional energy that attracts wandering souls. Mount Rokko is like a lighthouse for the dead. They're drawn to its spiritual power, but some become trapped there, unable to find their way to the next world. Local folklore speaks of Mount Rokko as a gathering place for souls preparing for their final journey. The Hitodama lights are believed to be spirits helping each other cross over, sharing the energy needed to complete their transformation from human consciousness to whatever lies beyond death. Paranormal researcher Dr. Akiko Yamashita has spent 5 years studying the Hitodama phenomena on Mount Rokko. Her team has documented over 200 sightings, photographed the lights using specialized equipment, and interviewed hundreds of witnesses. The evidence suggests the lights are not natural phenomena, but manifestations of consciousness that has survived bodily death. Dr. Yamashita's most compelling documentation occurred during a 3-night camping expedition in September 2024. Using infrared cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, and thermal imaging equipment, her team captured multiple interactions with the lights. The orbs appeared to respond to human presence, approaching when called, retreating when observers showed fear, and even seeming to pose for photographs. Most remarkable was footage captured on the second night. Multiple orbs appeared to emerge from the forest floor in a clearing where historical records indicate 3 hikers died in an avalanche in 1987. The lights hovered for several minutes before moving in formation toward the mountain summit, following what appeared to be the exact trail the lost hikers would have taken. Audio equipment captured electromagnetic interference that, when slowed down and filtered, reveals what sounds like whispered voices speaking Japanese. Linguistic analysis suggests the voices use archaic pronunciation patterns consistent with speech from several decades ago, matching the approximate time periods when known deaths occurred on the mountain. Temperature readings around the lights show they emit no heat, despite being visible on thermal imaging equipment, a physical impossibility according to current understanding of thermodynamics. The electromagnetic spikes recorded during appearances suggest an energy source, but one that doesn't conform to known physics. Local photographer Kenji Murakami has spent countless nights on Mount Rokko, attempting to capture the Hitodama lights on film. Over 3 years, he has taken thousands of photographs, but the lights appear in less than 5% of them, and only when they seem to want to be photographed. The light's behavior indicates intelligence beyond simple energy discharge. They avoid direct observation by skeptics, respond to emotional states of observers, and follow specific routes across the mountain that correspond to historical human activity. They appear most frequently to people experiencing grief, spiritual searching, or emotional transition. Most puzzling is their apparent ability to convey information. Multiple witnesses report receiving impressions or emotions from the lights, understanding their purpose or identity without verbal communication. Some described feeling comforted, others warned of danger ahead on mountain trails. Still others given a sense of closure regarding deceased loved ones. Scientific analysis of photographs and video footage reveals lights that emit no heat signature, despite being visible on thermal imaging equipment. The electromagnetic readings suggest an energy source, but one that doesn't conform to known physics. The lights move in ways that defy gravity and air current patterns, stopping and starting instantaneously, hovering without support, and traveling at speeds that vary from walking pace to nearly instantaneous. Mount Rokko remains one of Japan's most spiritually significant locations, a place where the boundary between worlds seems thin. The Hitodama lights continue to appear, defying scientific explanation while providing comfort to those who believe they represent final messages from the dead. Whether natural phenomenon or supernatural manifestation, the lights of Mount Rokko remind us that some mysteries may be beyond human understanding. For the people of Kobe, they represent hope that death is not the end, that consciousness can survive the destruction of the physical body, and that love transcends even the grave itself. The lights dance through the darkness of Mount Rokko, eternal flames of human consciousness refusing to be extinguished, bearing witness to the possibility that we are more than flesh and blood, that some part of what makes us human continues on beyond death, into realms we cannot yet comprehend. The Maya Hotel opened in 1929 at the height of Japan's Jazz Age prosperity. Perched majestically on Mount Maya, overlooking the glittering lights of Kobe Harbor. Designed by renowned architect Antonin Raymond in the Art Deco style popular among the wealthy elite, the hotel represented the pinnacle of luxury and sophistication in pre-war Japan. For nearly 15 years, the Maya Hotel hosted the rich and powerful from across the globe. Foreign diplomats, business magnates, and international celebrities regularly stayed in its opulent suites, enjoying panoramic views of the inland sea while dining on French cuisine and dancing to American jazz in the grand ballroom that could accommodate 300 guests. The hotel's golden era ended abruptly with Japan's entry into World War II. Military authorities requisitioned the building as an officer's quarters, and many of the foreign guests were detained or forced to flee the country. During the war years, the hotel's elegant halls echoed with military boots instead of dancing feet, and its luxurious rooms were converted into stark military accommodations. After the war, economic devastation made it impossible to restore the hotel to its former glory. The building sat largely abandoned for decades, slowly deteriorating as Japan rebuilt itself. The 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake dealt the Maya Hotel its death blow, causing catastrophic structural damage that made restoration economically impossible. Rather than demolish the ruins, authorities simply cordoned off the area, leaving the Maya Hotel to slowly crumble in the mountain forest. Nature began reclaiming the structure, with vines growing through broken windows and trees taking root in collapsed sections of the building. The legends of the Maya Hotel began almost immediately after its abandonment. Local teenagers daring each other to explore the ruins reported encountering phantom guests who seemed unaware that the hotel had closed decades earlier. Urban explorer Koji Nakamura first entered the Maya Hotel ruins in 2001, armed only with a flashlight and video camera. The main entrance was blocked, but there were several ways to get inside through damaged walls. The moment he stepped into what used to be the lobby, he felt like he was being watched. The temperature was at least 10 degrees colder inside than outside, despite the building having no roof in several sections. Nakamura's video footage shows the hotel's grand staircase, still partially intact despite years of weather damage. But it also captures something else: shadowy figures moving across the upper balconies, always remaining just outside the reach of his flashlight beam. He called out several times, thinking maybe other explorers were inside, but there was never any response, just movement in his peripheral vision. The most documented phenomenon involves room 237, the hotel's former presidential suite. Multiple witnesses report seeing lights in the room's windows at night, despite the fact that electricity has been disconnected for decades. The light always appears at exactly 10:30 p.m. and extinguishes at midnight, the exact hours when the hotel's restaurant used to serve its famous late dinner service. Security guard Hiroshi Taniguchi patrols the area around the Maya Hotel ruins twice weekly. Over the past 8 years, he has documented over 30 instances of unexplained lights in the abandoned building. The lights move through the structure as if following the hotel's original floor plan, appearing in sequences that match how guests would have moved from the lobby to the dining room to the ballroom. Taniguchi has attempted to investigate the lights multiple times, but they always extinguish when he approaches the building. On several occasions, he has found the ruins filled with the scent of expensive perfume and cigarette smoke, as if a party had just ended. Fresh flowers have appeared on what remains of the front desk, though no living person has been seen entering or leaving the building. Paranormal investigator Dr. Mitsuko Sasaki has interviewed over 30 people who claim to have encountered supernatural activity at the Maya Hotel. The reports are remarkably consistent. Witnesses see figures in 1930s formal wear, men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns, as if they're still attending elegant parties that ended 70 years ago. The phantoms always appear in the hotel's public areas, the ballroom, dining room, and main lobby. They never acknowledge living visitors, instead going through the motions of their former lives. dancing to music that no longer plays, raising champagne glasses in silent toasts, checking in at a front desk that no longer exists. Most unsettling are the reports of phantom conversations. Multiple witnesses describe hearing muffled voices speaking in English, French, and Japanese, the international mix of languages that would have been common during the hotel's heyday. The conversations always involve topics from the 1930s, business deals, social gossip, concerns about the war in China. Local artist Kenji Mori spent 6 months sketching the Maya hotel ruins in 2019. During his time there, he claims to have had multiple interactions with the phantom guests. On 3 separate occasions, he engaged in conversation with a woman in 1930s dress who appeared on the hotel's main balcony. She spoke perfect English and seemed confused about why the hotel appeared abandoned. When Mori tried to explain that decades had passed, she became agitated and vanished. But she always returned the next night, having no memory of their previous conversations, asking the same questions about why the hotel was closed and when the staff would return. Mori's detailed sketches show the hotel as it appears today, crumbling and overgrown. But superimposed over the ruins are translucent figures in period clothing, going about their daily activities as if the hotel were still operational. His art captures something that cameras cannot, the overlay of past and present existing simultaneously in the same space. Documentary filmmaker Yuki Taniguchi spent 6 months researching the Maya Hotel for his 2008 film, Guests Who Never Left. His team interviewed 12 people who claimed to have supernatural encounters at the ruins, including 3 who reported actually speaking with the phantom guests. Professional medium Akiko Watanabe conducted seances in the hotel ruins, attempting to communicate with the spirits she believes remain trapped there. During a ceremony in the former ballroom, she claims to have made contact with several entities. A German businessman who died of a heart attack in 1934, a French socialite who committed suicide in 1938, and a Japanese industrialist who was killed in an air raid in 1944. Each spirit expressed confusion about the hotel's current state and insisted they were simply waiting for their rooms to be prepared. They seemed unable to accept that they were dead, continuing to follow the routines of their lives as if nothing had changed. Local paranormal investigation group Kensai Spirit Research has conducted multiple overnight investigations at the Maya Hotel. Their most compelling evidence was captured during a 3-night study in October 2023. Digital audio equipment recorded what sounds like a full orchestra tuning instruments, followed by 7 minutes of dance music from the 1930s. No source for the sound could be identified. Night vision cameras captured translucent human figures in the hotel's dining room, seated at tables that no longer exist, making gestures consistent with eating and drinking. When investigators attempted to approach, the figures faded from view, but the cameras continued to record the sound of silverware against china and muffled conversation. Thermal imaging revealed human-shaped heat signatures moving through the ruins, maintaining consistent body temperatures despite the fact that the figures were transparent to normal vision. The heat signatures followed logical patterns using doorways and staircases, as if navigating a fully intact building rather than the ruins that currently exist. Environmental specialists found no natural explanation for the temperature variations documented inside the Maya Hotel ruins. The building's construction materials and exposure to the elements should create consistent temperatures throughout, yet investigators have recorded differences of up to 20 degrees between adjacent rooms. The electromagnetic readings suggest the presence of significant electrical activity in a building that has been without power for decades. Most puzzling are the audio phenomena, recordings of sounds that have no apparent source, speaking languages, and discussing topics specific to the hotel's operational period. Structural engineers examining the ruins found evidence of foot traffic in areas where the floors have collapsed, impossible without the restoration of structural supports that no longer exist. Fresh scratches appear on surfaces, Doors are found opened in rooms that have been sealed for years, and furniture appears to have been moved in spaces where no furniture remains. Photography in the ruins produces unusual results. Digital cameras often malfunction, producing images filled with orbs of light and shadowy figures that were not visible to the naked eye. Film cameras work more reliably, but developed photos frequently show double exposures, rooms appearing as they were in the 1930s superimposed over their current ruined state. The Maya Hotel stands as a monument to lost elegance, its ruins slowly being reclaimed by the mountain forest. But for those who believe in the persistence of human consciousness after death, it represents something else entirely. A place where the past continues to live, where phantom guests still check in for parties that will never end. The hotel's final guests may have left their bodies behind decades ago, but they have never truly checked out. They remain trapped in an endless loop of luxury and sophistication, forever celebrating in a ballroom that no longer has a roof, forever dining in a restaurant that no longer serves food, forever waiting for a tomorrow that will never come. Local historian Yuko Shimizu believes the spirits are drawn to the Maya Hotel because it represents the last moment of their happiness, the final time they felt truly alive. The hotel was a place of joy, celebration, and human connection. For those who died there, it became their eternal home, a place where they could continue the lives that were cut short by tragedy. The Maya Hotel's phantom guests continue their endless party, trapped in a time that no longer exists, in a building that no longer stands whole. They dance to music only they can hear, dine on food only they can taste, and live in luxury that exists only in their memories. They are the eternal guests of a hotel that closed decades ago, still waiting for a checkout time that will never come. As dawn breaks over the city of Kobe, the supernatural encounters of the night fade into the shadows. But the questions remain. In this ancient land where tradition holds that the dead continue to exist alongside the living, what we have witnessed challenges our understanding of life-death and the possibility that human consciousness can survive the destruction of the physical body. The Nunobiki Tunnel continues to echo with voices from the past, 17 forgotten workers still calling out from the darkness, still begging for recognition that may never come. The waters beneath the Akashi Kaikyō Bridge still hide their secrets. 304 souls lost to tragedy, still waiting for a rescue that will never arrive. The lights of Mount Rokko dance through the darkness, carrying messages from the dead to the living, bridging the gap between worlds. And in the ruins of the Maya Hotel, phantom guests continue their eternal celebration, forever trapped in a time of elegance and joy. Each location tells the same story. Death is not the end, but a transformation into something we do not yet understand. The spirits of Kobe refuse to rest because they have unfinished business, unresolved emotions, connections to the living world that death could not sever. Perhaps consciousness is more than electrical impulses in the brain. Perhaps memory, emotion, and identity can imprint themselves on places and objects so powerfully that they become independent of the physical body that created them. Perhaps what we call ghosts are simply echoes of intense human experience, replaying endlessly in locations where the boundary between life and death is thin. Or perhaps the human need to believe in continuation after death creates these encounters, a collective unconscious manifestation of our deepest fears and hopes about mortality. Perhaps the spirits of Kobe exist not in the external world, but in the hearts and minds of people who cannot accept that their loved ones are truly gone forever. The truth may lie somewhere between science and spirituality, between fact and faith, between the living and the dead. What is certain is that the people of Kobe continue to report these encounters, generation after generation, creating a living tradition that bridges the ancient and modern worlds. The workers in the Nunobiki Tunnel still call out in the darkness. The victims of the ferry disaster still drift beneath the bridge. The lights still dance on Mount Rokko. The guests still party in the ruins of the Maya Hotel. and the living continue to witness, to document, and to wonder about the persistence of human consciousness beyond the grave. In Kobe, the dead are never truly gone. They are simply waiting in the shadows, in the spaces between what we know and what we fear, between what we can prove and what we hope might be true. They are the eternal reminder that some mysteries cannot be solved, only experienced, only witnessed, only remembered. The haunting shadows of Kobe endure, challenging us to expand our understanding of what it means to be alive, what it means to die, and what it might mean to exist somewhere in between. The mystery continues, and perhaps it always will, for as long as humans fear death and hope for something beyond it. The spirits of Kobe have spoken. The question is, are we ready to listen?